everybody, I'm Brittany Lewis with Forbes Breaking News. Joining me now is former Congressman Will Hurd. Congressman, thank you so much for joining me.
Hey, Brittany, always a pleasure to be on with you.
And you are always welcome. Just earlier this week, you did announce your decision to suspend your presidential campaign. Can you walk us through what led to you deciding to suspend it?
Look, I did, and ultimately, here's the thing. Like I'm running. I decided to run because the country is faced with a number of generational defining challenges. Right? We've talked about that. How AI is going to impact every single industry. We're learning how complicated and dangerous the world we live in continues to be. We're having to make sure our kids improve our scores in math, science, and reading. That's why I decided to run. And ultimately, my pathway to victory was narrowing. And as the great Kenny Rogers said, you got to know when to hold them and know when to fold them. And the time has come to make sure that we have a Republican nominee that can win in November. I don't want to see a rematch that nobody wants between Joe Biden and Donald Trump. And that's why, getting behind Ambassador Haley, I think was the right move. She has the momentum, she has the experience, and she's the only person that's consistently polled as beating Joe Biden in the general election. And so this period between Halloween and Thanksgiving is very important. And so this is why I want to see if I can help someone and help Ambassador Haley continue her momentum.
Can you talk about how specifically you are going to help her? She did make waves in the debate, both times clashing with Vivek Ramaswamy, especially over foreign policy. So what does that help look like?
Well, look, the help looks however they think it's valuable, right? And so we've already done a couple of digital things together. I'm going to continue to talk about issues that matter, and I'm there to help however I can be, and so that'll evolve over the next couple of days and weeks. But ultimately, when I have conversations like we're having now, talk about why I think she's the best candidate and explain, Donald Trump is not inevitable. I think the media and a lot of voters think that that's necessarily the case. Look, he's a front runner. There's no question about that. But he can be beat. And there's a lot of fallacies out there about this upcoming election. If I can continue to try to debunk those, I think that creates a space for somebody like Ambassador Haley.
How do you think she can find that pathway to victory? And how do you think he can be beat amongst those Republican contenders? Because every poll has him up at least 40 points. So how do you narrow that gap, especially with Ambassador Haley?
Sure, and look, national polling versus individual state polling is different. When you look at the state polling in a place like New Hampshire, that margin of between number one and number two is less. Ambassador Haley's numbers in a place like New Hampshire have continued to grow, and one of the things that is not factored into a lot of the national narrative about a place like New Hampshire specifically is 40% of the primary electorate in New Hampshire is unaffiliated, meaning on election day they can choose a Republican ballot or a Democratic ballot. Joe Biden is not going to be on the Democratic ballot, so a lot of center left independents are going to be voting in the Republican primary. And there's not too many people that have the opportunity to target those folks. That's a group of voters that is not being reflected in a lot of the polling that's happening in New Hampshire. And Ambassador Haley can continue to grow her numbers. She's one of the few people in the race whose numbers consistently increase. The more people that see her, the more they like. And so she's got to continue doing that. Now, again, I'm not an official, person for the campaign, but these are just my perspectives as someone who's been on the ground. And also we need people to get off the sidelines. We need Republican donors and Republican elected officials that think they can wait until we get into 2024 to endorse or show support of a candidate. If we want to have conservative thought in the White House to address these generational defining challenges, then we have to start making tough decisions today in order to ensure that that happens.
I do want to compare some statements both from Ambassador Haley and Donald Trump over the past few days in regards to Israel. As you know,
Sure.
as our viewers know, on Saturday, Hamas attacked Israel in the worst attack the country has seen in over 50 years via land, air, and sea. So I'm going to read you a statement from Ambassador Haley. She immediately condemned Hamas. She unequivocally is standing with Israel, and she called out Iran. She said this: "I say this to Prime Minister Netanyahu, finish them. Finish them. Hamas did this. You know Iran is behind it. Finish them." And then Donald Trump said that Netanyahu was, quote, "not prepared," and Israel was not prepared. And under Trump, they wouldn't have had to be prepared. And, quote, if the election wasn't rigged, there would be nobody even thinking about going to Israel. What do you think about the juxtaposition of these two statements from two prominent Republicans?
Well, first and foremost, Donald Trump, even though when he was in president, his grasp of what really goes on is shockingly poor. Yes, he did the Abraham Accords, right, under his leadership, under his administration. But those Abraham Accords were negotiated by Mike Pompeo and his son-in-law, and Donald Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner. Those are two people that are not actively involved in this current Trump campaign. And so, the fact that Ambassador Haley's comments are reflective of where the majority of the world is because she understands these broader issues. I have even further concerns with Donald Trump because I think it was in the last 24 hours he praised Hezbollah. Hezbollah, is now getting in the action against Israel, and Donald Trump praised them. Those folks that were upset by the squad over, the last few days, the progressives in Congress that did not denounce Hamas. If you were outraged by that, then you should be outraged by the former president, the person leading in the polls of the Republican Party, saying something positive about a terrorist group that's attacking our ally. This is one of the reasons why I think Donald Trump is not fit for office.
And what do you think his foreign policy would look like? How dangerous do you think that would be if, as you're saying, he is praising Hezbollah, he's saying, under my leadership, this wouldn't happen under me? Do you think those types of comments are productive?
No, of course they're not productive. And let's review, right? During the Trump administration, we were able to dismantle ISIS. But it wasn't Donald Trump's ideas. It was General Mattis and Mark Milley, two people that are not going to be involved in Donald Trump's campaign. We already talked about the Abraham Accords established by folks that weren't there. The one idea that Donald Trump was exclusively Donald Trump's idea was trying to negotiate with North Korea. And we all know how poorly that went. And we've seen an increase in the number of testing of long-range weapons that Kim Jong-un did after that engagement. And even one of the signature moves that he wants to take credit for, Donald Trump does, of moving the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, that was Ted Cruz's idea. And Ted Cruz was the one that involved that. So again, and these are people that are not necessarily going to be involved in the foreign policy apparatus of another Trump campaign. So that's concerning, especially at a time when it's obvious how dangerous the world is. We have to continue to support our friends Ukraine again and help them continue to dismantle the Russian military. We have to support Israel. We have to be prepared for a conflict with the Chinese government, at the same time defending our borders. And we need fresh leaders. We need young leaders. We don't need somebody that's going to potentially be in their 80s as our commander in chief at such a critical time in the world.
How receptive is the Republican Party to this message right now? Because you did say you believe Donald Trump is beatable, but right now he's the front runner. I've asked you this before, but as you sit here right now, just a few months from the Iowa caucus, what do you think the future of the Republican Party is?
Well, the future of the Republican Party is unknown. It could be super bright. We could see in 2024 in a general election unbelievable wins and victories around the country, not just as president. Like the Republican Party has an opportunity to change a 20-year trend of losing the popular vote on the national level. That's the opportunity we have if we have the right leaders. But if we elect Donald Trump as our nominee, then that trend of losing is going to continue. The last election Donald Trump won was in 2016. He lost the House in 2018. He lost the White House and the Senate in 2020. He prevented a red wave from happening in 2022. And if this is the kind of if that's what the Republican voters want the party to look like, then we're going to continue to see losses in November.
I was in Iowa. I talked to voters there. You've been in Iowa. You've been crisscrossing the country. There are voters, according to polls and based on personal experience, of people saying no matter what, no matter the indictments, no matter anything, I will be supporting Donald Trump. So what's your message to them? How do you get what you're saying, your point across?
Well, I think if those people that are going to continue to support Donald Trump no matter what, they're going to support Donald Trump no matter what. But they are still not the majority of Republican primary voters. What always happens in elections, things narrow. And look, there's no question that Donald Trump is the front runner. There's no question that he has kind of the biggest base of support. But let's compare his support back to 2020 when he was at the height of his power. He had 98% of the Republican primary electorate tied up that said they were going to vote for him no matter what. 98%. And now that number is, hovers depending on where you are, what state it is, somewhere in the high 40s, sometimes in the 50s. But when we get close to an election and we see the field of candidates narrow, I think you're going to actually see that in the 30s. And so that's why the math is on the side. That's going to require a culling of the field, and that's going to require someone to continue to have momentum over the next couple of weeks. And that's the pathway to victory for somebody like Ambassador Haley.
Do you think more long-shot contenders should start dropping out of the race?
Well, look, I'm not in the business of telling people what to do. I always try to lead by example. And, I thought, as we're going into this critical period in the campaign, if there's not clear momentum and a clear pathway and showing a level of support that's being reflective in polling, then I think in order to ensure the GOP puts somebody up that can win in November because the country needs that kind of sane conservative leadership, then I think it's time for us to start consolidating. And that would be my advice to some of the other people that are in the race. Many are my friends and people that I think are great leaders within the GOP.
Congressman, I know a few months ago, you said you wouldn't go on the debate stage because you wouldn't pledge to support Donald Trump should he be the nominee. Do you still feel that way if he is the nominee? Would you not support him? Would you not vote for him?
I've made it very clear. I'm not going to support Donald Trump, and I believe that I'm not going to have to worry about that scenario because Nikki Haley is going to come through this race as the winner.
You were in the race for a couple of months. You crisscrossed across the country. What did you learn when running for president?
Look, it was an honor, to be put in a position to be able to run for president of the greatest country on the planet is amazing. And it confirms some things that I learned early on in my political career. Way more unites us as a country than divides us. And people want us to disagree without being disagreeable. That's what real people want. It's not always reflected in social media and people that are constantly doom scrolling on socials or only consuming cable news. The fact that there's Americans like in Iowa that, march 21 miles on September 11th, 22 years later, to honor the folks that were killed on that horrific day and to show support to the people that ran towards the sirens. This is an amazing country, and I think our best days are absolutely ahead of us. And that's something that I saw on the ground in places like New Hampshire, Iowa, Texas, South Carolina, all across the country.
When you're looking on social media, when you're watching the news regarding this upcoming presidential election, what do you think is missing from the national conversation then when it comes to 2024?
Well, look, I think one of the things we should be talking more about is how new technologies like artificial intelligence are going to upend every single industry. That's going to impact our economy in a way that most people don't realize or understand. And it's not just technologies like AI. You have quantum computing and synthetic biology, two areas that I don't think gets zero attention or focus. That's something that I've spent, most of my career and life dealing with. And those are something that requires an additional focus, because it's going to touch every single American. It's going to impact our kids and grandkids, and they got to be preparing for jobs that don't exist today. And this is something that, when it comes to jobs and the economy, is most Americans' number one concern.
Let's talk about that a little bit, because when anyone brings up AI, every person, even journalists, the first thing they think is, hey, is that going to take my job? Will I be out of a job? So how do you prepare for jobs that aren't existent yet?
Well, so first and foremost, yes, can AI lead to a lot of unemployment? It can, and that's why we got to take steps now. And the first step that we should be taking is doubling down on the fact that AI should follow the law. We have existing laws and rules. Let's not carve it out of the existing laws like we've done previous technologies. We did that with social media and said social media shouldn't follow the same rules as newspapers, TV, and radio. And that led to a wild, wild west that has shown that young girls are increasing cutting themselves because of how social media has made them view themselves, right? Like let's not make those same kind of mistakes with AI. We need to be making sure we're training our kids in this. We shouldn't be saying, schools shouldn't be saying, no, you can't use generative AI. We should be making sure they know how to capitalize on that. That would be the equivalent of when computers first came out. Be like, no, you know what? You can't type your paper on a computer or use a computer. You got to use a typewriter, like what you see over my shoulder here. Like that. Or you can't use your cell phone, right? Like we should be making sure that we're educating our kids on how to use these, because ultimately AI is a tool, and it's a tool that could lead us to solving harder, more impactful questions than what we can do today. And so but also with any kind of tool, it can be used for good or it can be used for bad, but we can't let the bad prevent us from figuring out how this solves major challenges, like finally deal with issues of climate change. How do we make sure we're producing batteries that last longer, or how we lead to finding preventing diseases from happening. So this is the future.
Congressman, you are always offering up solutions. Oftentimes they are bipartisan, about the generational problems affecting this country. So I'm curious about your future. What's next for Will Hurd? Can we expect you going back into politics?
Well, what's next for me is planning a honeymoon for my wife. I'm in my first year of marriage, and that's going to be my first focus and attention. I'm going to continue to work on issues of national security, technology, and what that looks like. I don't know yet, but in the meantime, I'm going to make sure that I give my wife the best honeymoon of honeymoons.
Well, after that honeymoon, I hope you come back and join us, talk about that future a little more. Congressman Will Hurd, thank you so much for joining me.
Always a pleasure. Appreciate you.